Ladies, gentlemen and MBs, just a heads up that this video will contain scenes of flashing lights, so please be careful.
Hi folks. Now I know what you're thinking. Is he really going to break new ground like this and talk about Star Wars? Something that no one on YouTube has ever done before? Yes. Yes I am. That's just the kind of bold, unique risk-taking that you come to this channel for, after all. This is very loud. Discussions around this franchise tend to be very literal and lore-heavy. People like to talk about things in terms of the universe, where they fit on timelines, whether or not the physics make scientific sense, and that's fine. If that's the way that you want to interact with a piece of media that you enjoy, then more power to you. I'm not about to try and take away your fun. It's just not for me. What I want to do is focus in on one element of this series and see how it can be used to enhance the emotions of the story being told. Specifically, I've been thinking a lot lately about lightsabers. Now, I'm only going to be talking about stuff from the 9 main films of the series, because much as there is stuff in the shows and the expanded universe that is probably very relevant to the discussion, I want to keep this thing some level of contained and manageable, I say, as I go on to talk about 9 movies in one video. So first and foremost, before they are cool swishy laser swords, before they are weapons of a more civilized age, before any of the stuff that we might associate with them, lightsabers are things, objects, stuff, possessions that belong to characters that gives them a layer of meaning that we might not necessarily think about. Because things mean stuff. They have a sentimental value and meaning that can be difficult to explain. Take this, for instance. Now, to you, this is just a dirty-looking scrap of paper, and it is undoubtedly that. But to me, this has a whole lot of meaning. You see, this is the remains of a boarding card to a flight to a family holiday that I had when I was a teenager. I can't even really remember how old. And I realised on the flight that I didn't have a bookmark, so I used the boarding card. And then once I finished the book, I realised it worked pretty well, so I just transferred it to the next book. And before too long, I was just seeing how long I could keep it going out of curiosity. And it turns out the answer is probably about half of my life. So this dirty, torn scrap of paper that was once a boarding card has an absurd amount of sentimental value to me, especially when you consider that it is literally rubbish. Probably says something about me, doesn't it? Back to where you belong. The meaning of an item is situational. It gets derived from the person who holds it and the connection that they have to it. And that meaning can change over time depending on what goes on in that person's life. I.e., the boarding card didn't mean much of anything to me when I tucked it in between the pages of whatever Stephen King book I was reading at the time. But it means so much to me now because of the time that I've had it and everything that I associate it with.
So, what do lightsabers mean? Well, it depends entirely on which character we're talking about. One would mean something very different to General Grievous than to Ki-Adi-Mundi. So let's focus our efforts in on what they represent to our main characters, the ones at the centre of the franchise who have the most lightsaber-related goings-on anyway. Luke, Anakin, and Rey. The first time we see a lightsaber in the whole series is when Luke is presented one by Obi-Wan Kenobi. This is the moment where Luke learns about the Jedi Order and its values, and hears that his father was one of these warrior heroes as he is handed this object that belonged to him. So to Luke in this moment, the saber represents a whole lot of stuff. It's a symbol of the world that Luke wants to be a part of, getting out of Tatooine, out of the rut of his aunt and uncle's moisture farm. Through Obi-Wan and through this saber, Luke has a way out. The escape that he's wanted for so long. But more importantly, it is a physical, tangible connection to the father he never knew, with information at last about how he died, falling to the hands of evil. The saber is the symbol of the tantalizing chance to leave his dead-end life behind and learn more about his father's past and the heroic deeds he must surely have done. Which is, of course, everything that Uncle Owen has been afraid of, that Luke will leave and get himself killed, trying to live up to the legacy that lightsaber represents. When the stormtroopers have left his aunt and uncle extra crispy, and Luke decides to go with Obi-Wan, it isn't because he wants to fight against the people who did it. It isn't because he wants to bring peace and justice to the galaxy. It's because he wants to follow in his father's footsteps and become a Jedi.
I want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father.
Not because it's the right thing to do, but because it will make him more like his father. and that means taking up the lightsaber that belonged to him. But of course, this tie that he feels to his father through the saber isn't exactly all that it seems. As he advances in his training, his connection to the Force growing, he is shown a vision where he battles against Darth Vader, the man he has been told killed his father. He uses the symbol of his father's legacy to shatter Vader's helmet and sees himself, foreshadowing the Oh, hello. You're really messing up my recording here. Foreshadowing the truth that he will soon come to learn.
I am your father.
Everything that he has been told is a lie. His father isn't a hero who fell trying to protect the galaxy from evil. He is the evil that the galaxy fell to. Everything that Obi-Wan told Luke was just done to trick him, to give him a fake motivation to go after Vader and not hesitate when the time came.
Although, not really sure what motivation you need beyond he's a Nazi, but whatever.
And in this moment, when everything Luke thought he knew, everything he has been building his life around since he found out gets ripped from him, the saber is ripped from him too. Everything that spurred him into training to be a Jedi, everything that took him out of his simple farm boy life, everything that represents the connection to the father he never knew is taken from him by force as the hard truth is revealed. From there, Luke could have rejected the Jedi Order altogether, seeing as everything that he had believed it meant was a lie, and the two masters who he learned from were the ones who were lying to him. But he stays the course. He gives himself the title of Jedi and constructs his own lightsaber. Luke at the beginning of Return of the Jedi is such a far cry from the first two movies. He came on so much in confidence between the films, and nowhere is that change in character more clear than in his lightsaber. It is totally different to the other sabers we have seen up to this point. Before this, all we've had is blue for good and red for bad, and suddenly we have green. As if to say, Luke is being a Jedi, but rejecting the identity that was previously tied to it. He is doing it his own way, and following his own path to get there. And yes, I know that in the prequels green lightsabers became super common, but please try to remember that they wouldn't exist for another 16 years after this came out, and it is possible to read the original movies in that context without looking at the ones that didn't exist when it was made. So at this point, the green saber was unique and cool, and meant something special when Luke used it as a way to embrace being a Jedi, while rejecting the lies that led him to the path. But of course, the moment that he truly embraces what it is to be on the side of good is at the climax of the movie, when he has a chance to kill Darth Vader, and in his rage he nearly takes it. But then he remembers that this is his father, the real reason that he became a Jedi in the first place, even if it was based on a lie. If he gives into his instinct in that moment and kills Vader, then he gives the Emperor what he wants and fails in exactly the same way his father did. And if he gives up on his father, then he fails in exactly the same way that Obi-Wan did. And so, he takes a very different action, and throws his lightsaber to one side. Luke saw that if he kept using this weapon, then he would become just as bad as the things he was fighting against, and he took a stand to say that he is not going to be another tool of this ridiculous wrinkled old space Nazi. In that moment, not fighting is the most heroic thing he could do, and throwing away the very token of his identity as a Jedi is the moment that expresses that to the audience. Of course, you probably shouldn't tell a Nazi that you're not going to either join him or oppose him, because, you know... Good symbolism made by a bad character decision.
Now, in the prequels, lightsabers operate pretty differently to how they do in the original series. They're given a lot less weight and significance, largely just because there's so darn many of the things. With the Jedi at the height of their powers, you see them absolutely everywhere, to the point where they become kind of meaningless. Just tools that are used to accomplish their goals without much thought given to their importance.
It's part of a general demystification of the Jedi that the prequels are doing. They aren't quite the noble warriors that Obi-Wan made them out to be to Luke. They were overly confident space cops who stopped paying attention to the stuff that really mattered and became unknowing pawns of the most evil dude in the galaxy as he took over everything in a fascist coup. Stripping the lightsabers of their significance just further serves to display how disconnected the Jedi have become from the idea of what they are supposed to be. The prequels are more well thought out than their execution makes it seem. Not to say that there isn't any significance given to them. Young Anakin first realises that Qui-Gon is a Jedi when he sees his saber.
I saw your laser sword. Only Jedis carry that kind of weapon.
And it makes it clear that the Jedi are looked up to as these almost mythical beings, because he's certain that no one but a Jedi could wield a weapon like that. To Anakin, being a Jedi would be this incredible honour, where he would get to be so much more than he currently is. But once he actually gets to become one, well, they make the mistake of telling him how powerful he is, and he believes his own hype super hard. Anakin is cocky, brash, and hasty. He doesn't have the patience to be a Jedi in the way that the others around him do. So to him, the lightsaber is no longer this symbol of the almighty power of the Jedi, but just a thing that he uses. It becomes so insignificant to him that when he loses it towards the end of Attack of the Clones, he just kind of gets another one like it's no big deal. Like these two guys just had spares on them. So when we see him using the lightsaber Luke had in those first two movies, it means more to the audience who recognise it than it does to the character. That is until... Anakin turns his back on the Jedi. He has been seduced by the dark side because he thinks he can save the woman he loves from the visions of her death that he has foreseen. All the Jedi had to offer on this front was don't form emotional attachments to people, like that's any kind of useful advice to give to, you know, a person who is alive and has feelings. So Anakin is now a Sith. But he doesn't switch over to a red lightsaber right away, even though that is the only colour that we have seen the Sith use. He keeps using the same lightsaber. The symbol of the Jedi turned against them. Say what you want about the overall quality of these movies, you cannot deny how striking and powerful an image it is when we see our protagonist fire up that lightsaber so that he can murder a room full of children. Like, we knew he was going to turn evil by the end of this, but I mean, damn. So it's no wonder that following their silly lava hover car twirly-whirly battle, when Obi-Wan leaves Anakin for dead, he takes the saber with him. Rather than have something that represents everything that he sees as right about the universe represent everything wrong, he takes it away from him, showing that Anakin is lost to the Jedi, seemingly forever, as he takes up the mantle and the weapon of the dark side, his last connection to the life he knew gone forever. But also, Obi-Wan might just be keeping it as a reminder of the friend he just lost. When we get to the sequel trilogy, lightsabers are once again a rare commodity, so they feel more special and important to individuals. In Force Awakens, we see the return of the lightsaber that Luke lost, along with his hand, back in Empire, in Maz Kanata's basement. How it came back matters so little that they just kind of forgot to ever actually answer how Maz got it.
Where'd you get that?
A good question. For another time.
But it is interesting that they chose to bring it back. Beyond what it means for the audience's nostalgia, it does get used in some really interesting character ways. Its introduction to the story comes when Rey suddenly feels drawn to it, as if a voice in the back of her head is calling her there. When she touches it, she is given a number of indistinct visions of the past and possible futures, as the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi whispers to her that these are her first steps. But greeted with this overwhelming experience, Rey is like, nope, and leaves it right there. She still thinks that she can just go home and wait for her fantasy idea of her parents to save her. And this vision she's just been shown is telling her that she can take action and control her own fate, and that's not something she's ready for. She doesn't want to have some kind of destiny to be someone important. She only wants to be Rey. So leaving the saber behind and running is a clear sign of where she is at emotionally. She doesn't touch the saber again for most of the movie, with Finn getting a couple of uses of it in the meantime, until she finds herself in a situation where she has no choice but to take action and get involved in what is happening. When faced with Kylo Ren, who desperately wants the saber for himself, for reasons I'll talk about in a bit, she knows that she can't let him have it, or else her and Finn are definitely dead. And so she finally stops running from herself and from the power that is awakening within her, and uses the Force to pull the saber to herself, fully embracing her destiny and taking control of her powers to hold off Kylo long enough to make an escape. Then she goes to learn more about the changes she is going through, and to try and recruit Luke Skywalker back to the cause, as we enter into the best Star Wars movie. Oh, the comments on this one are gonna suck. And we get perhaps the funniest possible way to resolve a 2-year-long cliffhanger.
Safe to say this moment was contentious, and I don't want to get too much into all that nonsense again, but I do just want to say that Luke throwing away the lightsaber is genius, and here's why.
So Luke's whole deal in this movie is that he feels completely ashamed of his failing his nephew in the way that he did, of failing his sister and his friend in the way that he did, He thinks that because of this mistake that he made, where for a brief moment he was so convinced that Ben might have fallen to the dark side that he considered killing him, that he blames the entire Jedi ideology that he had ascribed to. He cuts himself off from the Force and is all set to burn down the original Jedi Temple. To him, the whole religion is a worthless sham that was only ever kept going by a bunch of people who were too stubborn to see its failures. So, what is the fastest way to get across to the audience that Luke is feeling this way? Have him throw away the very symbol that drew him into the religion in the first place as if it was just the least important piece of rubbish. And hey, Luke doesn't end the movie in the same place as he starts it. Through his time with Rey and one more lesson from Yoda, "This is the best scene in the entire franchise and you can quote me on that," Luke realises that yes, his faith in the Jedi Order did cause him to fail, but instead of just hiding away and giving up, he should learn from his failure and use his ability to help people. So he projects himself across the whole galaxy to be a wonderful distraction. And when he does this, he shows himself holding a lightsaber, but he doesn't use his green saber, the one that you might have expected him to use. He uses the same saber he threw away at the start of the movie. He comes full circle and does a really clear symbolism about his change of heart through the lightsaber that he chooses. Luke throwing away the saber also works well towards Rey's continued journey. Following having everything awaken with her in the previous movie, she has gone to Luke specifically for answers. She doesn't know what's happening to her, and Luke Skywalker is surely the person who will understand her. So she is holding out this lightsaber, imploring him, "Please help me," which he responds to by literally throwing her desperate plea over his shoulder and locking himself in his depression hut. So Rey is told in no uncertain terms that she is on her own with this. Now, Luke does eventually stop wallowing and agree to help Rey, but the way he is to her, distant and judgmental, she can't really trust him. He clearly has the information she needs to know, but he won't give her the emotional support she needs, which is why she ends up connecting so much with Kylo in their Force meetings. He actually offers her sympathy and listens to her struggles about her parents and her weird Force vision, and convinces her of his version of the truth, that Luke tried to kill him in cold blood. At least for a moment. When Luke sees this connection, he tries to stop it, but Rey fights back. He holds his own against her very casually until she uses the saber. She takes the thing that she went to him for help with and turns it against him, clearly telling him that once again he has failed, and that their time together is over. This is the moment where it really becomes Rey's saber, where she takes ownership of what she wants to do and stops looking to others to help her. She goes to Snoke's dreadnought and, well, things don't really go quite as she was expecting, because Kylo had his own agenda the whole time. What that specific lightsaber means to Kylo is abundantly clear. It is the lightsaber that belonged to his grandfather, the one that he had as he turned to the dark side. Kylo wants nothing more than to be his grandfather, to be Darth Vader, and he can't be because he's... unstable. His past, with his loving parents and his connection to the brightness in the galaxy, makes him struggle with committing to the dark side. And hey, his lightsaber, as well as looking heckin' cool, is also a really obvious baby's first symbolism where it's as unstable as he is. But come the end of Force Awakens, he's just killed his own dad and he's been shot by his furry uncle and he's a bit emotional, and he sees a... traitor! Holding the lightsaber that by rights should be his, and he wants it. If he has that, then it solidifies who he is supposed to be. To him, it is a way to fix the instability that is plaguing him so badly. But then, Rey pulls it away from him. Someone who he overpowered earlier with no problems, and now she just pulls away his birthright. And maybe he still isn't good enough. So coming into Last Jedi, he is even more shook up, brought into focus by Snoke messing with him, but then he gets this lifeline through his connection with Rey. She comes expressly to help him escape Snoke's influence and gives him the opportunity to kill him, which he does with the same dang lightsaber. Then, as they get into this outrageously cool fight, he is comfortable enough to let Rey use the saber, because he has found himself in that moment and doesn't need it.
So, both Rey and Kylo become more certain in themselves by using that specific lightsaber against the mental figure that they have been dealing with throughout the story, and this movie is very good.
But alas, they want different things. To Kylo, becoming more whole means taking more power, whereas to Rey, it means knowing herself and finding closure in the knowledge that her parents are never coming for her. So the two get into a tug of war over the saber as their desires come into conflict with each other, ending explosively, with Kylo alone with everything he thought he wanted, and Rey torn up accepting her new life and seeing her hopes for redeeming Kylo drift away. With the saber split in two, saying all of this in ways words never could.
But then, sadly, we get to the Rise of Skywalker. And it gets so much stuff wrong that it honestly boggles the mind that they managed to make a product this empty and spineless, largely with the problems coming down to it not having the courage of the previous movie's convictions. Only compounded by the tragic passing of Carrie Fisher and their attempt to integrate her into the movie using deleted footage from The Force Awakens. Personally, I think they did it about as well as they could have managed.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes!
You know what I'm saying?
Yes!
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I...
You know what I'm saying?
I told you!
You know what I'm saying?
Look,
You know what
I
I'm
said that
saying? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
I
You
said
know what I'm saying?
Shut up!
So the lightsaber is just kind of fixed with no signs of the damage that was done in the previous movie, because they had the footage of Leia handing it to Rey where it wasn't damaged, with only a patch that I didn't spot the 3 times I saw this movie, and only noticed when I was already editing this footage and had to change the line to hint at the emotional journey that Rey went through in the last movie. Suddenly, she's back to square one, not in charge of herself, worried about her parentage again, and relying on Leia's teaching to become more comfortable with being a Jedi, even though she seemed pretty cool with it at the end of the previous movie as she battled against the Praetorian guards and lifted rocks and stuff. So, except for having more ability with the Force and being able to do the big flip, Rey has reverted back to less growth than she previously had because they wanted to make her Palpatine's granddaughter, and the only way to do that is to make it like the reveal in the previous movie didn't really count, and so she's back to where she was, and the lightsaber is back to where it was, and her journey in this movie is just... It takes until a pretty long way into the movie for her to learn the Palpatine reveal, with this lousy line.
You don't just have power. You have his power.
From there, she is mostly running and trying to prove herself not evil because of genetic predestination, and she ends up stabbing Kylo and feeling pretty lousy about herself because of it, trying to exile herself the same way Luke did, and throwing away the saber, only to be met with...
A Jedi's weapon deserves more respect.
Oh, fuck's sake. So this is where things go even more squirrely and off the rails. Luke shows Rey another lightsaber that he hid with him when he went into exile there. Leia's lightsaber. We learn through a flashback, with that bad deepfake de-aging effect that they do, that Luke trained Leia as a Jedi for a little bit, until she gave up because she had a Force vision about her son Ben turning into Kylo, and decides to give up on being a Jedi when she sees that because... So she gave Luke her saber, and he took it with him to the original Jedi Temple when he was desperately abandoning his past and trying to cut himself off from everything because... So we get shown this saber and told it is important because it belonged to Leia, but because of the unfortunate circumstances, we get no sense of what relationship Leia ever had to it, so it ends up just feeling like it has no meaning whatsoever. Rey will take this and her lightsaber to fight against Palpatine, mostly just because the now suddenly reformed Ben Solo, who gets to that place right out of nowhere honestly, will need a new lightsaber because he symbolically threw his bad guy saber away.
Now, it seems to me that there is a pretty simple solution to this. Just make it Ben's saber. The one that he used to defend himself against Luke in the flashbacks during The Last Jedi. You just say that when he turned his back on the Jedi, he left the lightsaber behind, and Luke took it with him as a reminder of his failure. Then it has a connection to things that have happened in this trilogy. Luke had a reason to take it with him, and it'll have even more meaning when he gets it back at the end to show how he has come back to the light.
Editing David from the future here, just to let you know that the following sequence contains clips of the bit where they're on the planet Exegol, where the flashing lights are particularly bad. So I wanted to just give an extra warning with a time code to say you can skip here to get past this bit. You're not really missing that much of the video at this point. There will be a clickable version in the etc, so I'm just going to give a few seconds to allow people to go to that. I leaned my elbow on the keyboard and I was worried that I pressed something. But anyway, they go to fight Palpatine, and Rey uses both sabers to show that she now represents all the Jedi or some nonsense. They do the same ending as Endgame in the same year.
I am inevitable.
And I am
Iron Man.
I am all the Sith.
And I I'm all the Jedi.
Because capitalism breeds creativity, Ben dies and the movie mercifully draws to a close. Rey heads back to the moisture farm from the first movie and buries the two sabers there, meaning that she symbolically buries Luke and Leia in a place that Luke hated, and Leia went to a grand total of 1 time and got turned into a sex slave for a giant slug monster. Rey has made a new lightsaber out of her staff, and it would have been way better if she'd had it all through the movie, because this is the sign of her finally embracing herself as a whole human being, as she says the ending line that everyone hates.
Rey Skywalker.
By looking at who owns lightsabers, when they receive them, how they use them, you can get a lot of interesting insights into their characters. In the original and sequel trilogies, the rarity of lightsabers makes the journeys that characters go through with them feel pretty tight and emotional, with a lot of their most significant moments being tied into their glowy swords. While the prequels makes their insignificance significant, as a sign of the complacency of the heroes of the movie. They're a versatile storytelling tool when they're used well, and an interesting lens to use to look at these movies through if you want to get just a little bit more out of them. So, what do lightsabers mean? Well, all sorts of things.
I would just like to thank my patrons for their support. There are quite a few more of you this time, so that's lovely. With an extra special thanks to Dan Brown, Chris Harper, William Gray, and Bags. If you'd like to support me, then head to patreon.com/DavidJBradley. If you do, you'll get to see all my videos early, get to see exclusive bloopers, and get access to my private Discord server. If not, then you can still help the channel out a whole lot by liking, commenting, subscribing, or clicking one of the videos that will pop up now.